Hi guys, I'm Whitney and welcome back to my channel. Today is my July wrap-up. This time I decided I wanted to try something a little bit different. Instead of taking a lot of time to explain all 10 of the books I read this month, I wanted to do 2 pullouts. Specifically, I wanted to do the 2 best books I read this month and the 2 that I disliked the most and why. And then for the rest of the novels that I've read, I'm just gonna kind of flash them on the screen and give you a quick synopsis with just a couple of words and tell you whether I liked it or didn't like it. Let's start with the 2 novels that were not my favorites this month. The first was a book that I picked up, The City of the Golden Shadow by Tad Williams. That's right, the fantasy author Tad Williams wrote a sci-fi series of 4 books. This series has been on my list forever, and I decided, hey, Tad Williams is getting a lot of acclaim right now on booktube, but I want to see how he can do sci-fi. And I gotta tell ya, it's a little bit different than what I expected. This novel follows a girl named Rini, who is an instructor of a virtual reality users in the future of South Africa. She unearths a mysterious golden city in the virtual world that she can never seem to find a second time. And the harder she searches, the more it seems like this mysterious city is behind the disease that is infecting only children of the world who log into virtual space, including her younger brother Steven, who now is in a coma. This book is very soft sci-fi, and it's written in the style of epic fantasy, which is really interesting because you can see that Tad Williams is building the world the same way that he would build the world for a fantasy epic, which is good in a way because we get a lot more details about future South Africa than we would in maybe other novels written by maybe someone else. However, we also get the slogging, dragging pace of an epic fantasy in this novel, which is one of the big negatives of it. As a matter of fact, I think in this whole first novel, which is a pretty thick one, we don't get an actual plot advancement until the last chapter. Yeah, that's it, the last chapter. The whole first book was nothing but world building. And to top it off, it's all about like diseased children. So this novel was something that wasn't my top pick for this month because while it was intriguing and interesting, we didn't get to the plot until the end. Now, I might pick up the second novel and just see if he finally picks up the pace, but at least for this month, it wasn't my top. The second novel that wasn't my top pick for this month is become a recent booktube baby, and that's the novel How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu. This novel was bleak and depressing, and I'm really surprised, honestly, that so many people really like this novel. Maybe I just don't want any more bleak, depressing things in my life. I found it a really difficult novel to get through, not because it was poor writing or poor plotting, but because of just how depressing it was. I felt like this book was such a slap in the face. This novel follows 3 points of view, all of whom are linked in some way by profound grief or loss. The first is a team of scientists in the Arctic Circle that discover an ancient virus that they accidentally release into the world that infects children. This leads to the twilight of the human species, and the lead scientist's estranged father is sort of reconnecting with his daughter who has already died by the time the book starts through her scientific journal and really understanding all of the things that she gave up to do all of the research that she's done. It ended up being something that was a very interesting look at fatherhood. The next point of view is across the world with a heartbroken scientist who's searching for a cure for his son who has acquired this disease. During testing, they use pigs as test subjects. One of the test subject pigs develops the human capacity for both speech and understanding. He has to explain to the pig what he was made for and why. And again, this is a whole nother level of ethics and heartstring pulling that I just couldn't take this month. It was really rough. That being said, the last one was a failed stand-up comedian who ends up working at a euthanasia theme park for these dying children of the plague so they can all die having fun, which is also a little bit like bleak and depressing. And he ends up falling for one of the mothers who is putting her son on this euthanasia theme park. Like I said, this was just a lot of dead kids this month, and I don't know what's going on with these two novels, but I'm kind of over dead children, I don't know. If this is a novel that sounds great to you and you love crying during the novel and you love feeling that loss and that connection, this author really does a good job of making you care about the characters only enough to rip your heart out. So if that's for you, enjoy. If it's not for you, like it's not for me, then not my favorite books this month. And now I want to go through the other novels that I've read this month and tell you a little bit about them and see how this goes. So let's get to the standouts of the books this month. The first one was a book called 1 Second After by William Forstchen? Not sure how to say that.
Forstchen.
This novel was a post-apocalyptic novel that follows a gentleman named John Matherson. He is a widower who is raising his 2 young daughters in a North Carolina town when a EMP blast goes off over all of North America, wiping out all of our electronics. This actually causes a lot of problems within America itself because we're so dependent and reliant on our technology. He is trying to struggle to survive with his 2 children, also like trying to help keep his community in his small town in North Carolina alive. And this book really goes step by step over how quickly society devolves into something just on the simple basis of cars don't run anymore, so we have supply chain problems and we can't get medicines from one place to another. If we can't order it on Amazon, how are you going to get enough shoes or enough soap to prevent you from getting an infection, which we don't have antibiotics for anyway? It was a very realistic novel. It really went through a lot of the nitty-gritty of what I would expect the post-apocalyptic book to be. It actually gave me a little bit of anxiety in a good way of, yeah, I don't have enough shoes, or I don't even have enough water for a week, much less a month. Maybe I should be buying some extra supplies and having them in my back pantry. I guess the book kind of made me realize how fragile our society is and how unprepared we all really are. I guess I'm a little bit of a prepper now, not really sure. I really enjoyed this character, and while again this didn't necessarily blow me out of the water, the realism of how fragile our society is was awesome. What is really interesting about this novel also, the US Congress has recommended this novel to all of its citizens, which is not something that happens very often, is something that because the US Congress is recommending a sci-fi book, of course I had to go get it and check it out. I also discovered that it is the first in a trilogy. I do think this book can stand alone if you're not into trilogies, but I will be picking up the second novel to check it out and see how the series continues. So the next standout this month was The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wang. Now, you might have heard of this novel before because it's been a recent booktube baby. And I gotta say, the hype isn't overhyped. This book really is a fantastic standout novel. The things that make it so good is the characters and the rawness and the humanity that is exemplified in this novel. It was beyond good. Now, I do have to warn you, if you're going into this novel thinking that it's going to be perfect, it's not. If you're going into this novel because you want a rich magic system and you want a whole bunch of action, that's not what you're gonna get in this novel. Let me tell you a little bit about it. This book follows the legendary warrior family of the Matsudas, who due to their water powers have been the protectors of their small island nation for the last several generations. And this responsibility lays heavy on the shoulders of all the individual members of the family and follows each individual member and how they struggle to uphold their duties and responsibilities within this family. The points of view in this novel were incredibly vivid and humanistically raw and real, but the star of this novel was definitely Misaki. She is the warrior mother who we follow because she has given up all of her hopes and her dreams. She's given up her warrior background and her true love, all to fulfill the duty that she held to her family and the Matsuda family with this arranged marriage. She has provided heirs and done everything she can to fulfill her responsibility within this family. This was an amazing novel, an amazing character, because we get such a beautiful image of the sacrifices of motherhood. We also get her dealing with the loss of the expectations of and her potential of what she could have been and could have had. So much of her life is seeped in regret and seeped in this expectation hangover, and how we follow her throughout the entire novel of her trying to put her life back together and trying to find some semblance of love and reason to go on despite all of these things that she has given up to be there. It's just an unequaled novel with all of these expectations, and it sounds so depressing, and yet the ending was so hopeful. I do think it's worth saying that the novel isn't perfect. It does suffer from many of the typical flaws that you'll see in a lot of debut novels. Things like pacing isn't always the best. She flips back and forth between different like first person and third person in weird times that sometimes throws you off. She's going through a lot of like day-to-day details that maybe you didn't need to know. I do think that some of the imperfections of this novel really make it so good. It adds to the rawness and the truth behind these characters, and it makes you really feel a part of the world and a part of Misaki's life. I really related to this novel. Even though I'm not a mother myself, I felt like it wasn't just about motherhood, but the person behind the middle-aged married woman's life and what it's like and what your sacrifices are and how to go through when you think things should have ended up better than they did. I felt the power of this novel, and I would highly recommend it to anyone out there who wants to really feel what the characters are like. If you're a character-influenced reader, this book is definitely for you and could be one of my top books of 2022. And that does it for my July wrap-up. All 10 novels that I read, with the 2 standouts and the 2 least favorite novels of this month. How did you like this format? Let me know in the comments below. Give me a like or a thumbs up. I'll see you in the next video.